You might know me as the small computer guy or the ubiquity fairy or whatever you want to know me as, but what you probably don't know me as is a dude that likes 3D printers. I have a Prusa Mark IVs at home and that thing frickin' rips. It's the most reliable printer I've ever had, and the only thing I've ever wanted out of it is an enclosure. I have this stupid like weed grow tent thing that's honestly bigger than this box, but today Prusa is solving that problem for me, maybe. This is the Prusa Core 1. It is their new Core XY printer, which if you're unfamiliar, and you might be familiar with Prusa's other printers, which are the bed slinger style, as in the build plate actually moves back and forth for that axis. This one, not unlike their Prusa XL, the bed only moves up and down, and the print head is what moves back and forth, which gives them a bit of an advantage, specifically in terms of space. You don't have to move the giant build plate back and forth. So we should be getting a bigger build area in the same amount of space and also an enclosure. They include gummy bears. We've got a sheet with whatever stuff's in here, a steel sheet Core 1. I like the new design though, it's pretty. This is a smooth PEI sheet, so this is something you would use with like PLA filament. Usually not with filaments that are stickier and might get stuck enough that you would damage the plate trying to take it off. So we've got a power cable. This thing got whomped in shipping. There's a screw. Glenn? What's this? Oh, it comes with a roll of filament. Prusa PLA Galaxy Black. This is really pretty stuff. Despite the loose screw, it doesn't have any obvious damage. Now this thing is built around a steel exoskeleton, as they call it. So in theory, it should be incredibly strong. And I mean, it got bonked pretty hard and it still looks like a big old rectangle. There's the screen. We've got a number 2 Phillips screwdriver, a little pair of pliers, which is always nice. And then the various Allen keys and wrenches you need to service this thing. If you're not familiar with Prusa's, a big selling point for them, they make and sell parts for basically any piece of this machine. And not only that, you can modify them, which is super cool. Like, thanks, Bell. Bell, Bell, Bell. Now, one curious change I've started to notice in Prusa's manufacturing. It used to be that like every single part of your printer that was plastic was 3D printed. Well, now they've started doing injection molding for the screens, which it does look nicer, but it also means that this part is less replaceable, I guess. I mean, I'm sure they'll probably give you a 3D printable version of this. I mean, this is basically the same screen cover they've been using for ages. It feels a little bit icky. Let's try and click it on here. Feed that through there. There we go, boom. Attached. We've got other build plates. So there's all 3 of them, smooth, satin, and textured. And if you're unsure of which one you should use with a certain filament, they actually have a pretty good like materials guide on their website that tells you which one is best. If you're just printing with PLA all the time, the smooth one it comes with will be just fine. This is the camera module, a couple extra magnets. These don't come in the box, but because it's steel, you can print some cool accessories. And then nylon rivets. Oh, that's what this is held in with, is a nylon rivet. This printer uses Prusa's Nextruder, which is the fancy word for extruder. You can see it right here. And it has a high flow nozzle. It's kind of a cool piece of technology. Inside the nozzle, you have like the stream of plastic comes in and then it splits into multiple paths inside to like better distribute the heat load, I guess, and allow the nozzle to flow faster than just a normal one. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Let's install our little camera thingy. There's a USB-C cable. And then is this just magnetic? Now that it's sitting there properly, it magnets in there pretty good. And all this hard work has really got me feeling like gummy bears. Here, I'll give you guys one too. And you can have the segue to our sponsor.
Vessi. February, that time of year where you feel like, yeah, the weather's gonna be clearing up, but then no. It starts snowing in Florida. Well, with Vessi and their dry sock guarantee, it doesn't matter. You'll be ready for any weather, any time of year. So maybe pick up a pair of their weekend Chelseas. They combine year-round style with a high-traction rubber sole and a cozy fleece lining that keeps your feet warm and dry, all while still letting them breathe so you don't have to worry about knocking anybody out when you go to take them off. Go to Vessi.com/ShortCircuit to get an automatic 15% off your first purchase. gonna have that linked down below.
Like I mentioned before, the enclosure is one of the biggest changes here. It's just like a lot of the other 3D printers in the market now. Their previous printers, you would have to buy or build a separate enclosure that made them like way bigger. But this one, nice and compact and includes an enclosure, and part of that is this door, which is actually pretty cool, and it does open and lock in a few different places, and you can actually flip the hinges to the other side, which is pretty cool. There is also a vent on the top here, you can see, and this vent is important when you're printing PLA or PETG because despite an enclosure being helpful for like keeping dust down and whatnot, and regulating the temperature so that if somebody opens an exterior door, you don't get a big rush of cold air. PLA and PETG don't really like it when it gets really hot. So you're better off keeping this open to keep the temperature down, but then you still get the benefits of an enclosure. On the outside, they've got these cool like cutout things, which are perfect for this side, like you can see with the included thing, putting your spool of filament. And then the filament feed, you can see the tube is poking out right there. So you put your spool on, feed your filament in there, and it doesn't take up any additional space on the back or the side of the printer. It is inset, and then you also have the same thing on the other side. In the future, once they have the multi-material add-on kit available, I guess you could probably put another spool here, and that could be 2 filaments, and maybe you put 3 more on the top. I don't know, we'll have to see what that actually looks like once it comes out. The back, we can see the power cable here. We've got an Ethernet jack, NFC, which is used for pairing Wi-Fi more easily. If you download the app, you can then like NFC the Wi-Fi credentials to the printer, which is a nice add-on. And then they've got this chunk here, which is where the Wi-Fi module is located. It's inside of here. And then there's a header here, which at least on the Mark IVs is used to connect an accelerometer. I know that they also have a GPIO hacker board thing where you can use the printer to send signals to other things. What that is, it's kind of up to you. You could use it to like trigger a DSLR camera if you're doing a time lapse or something like that. And then there's a USB-C port, which I don't actually know what is for. Power button, power plug, which we're gonna need. Now, a lot of this printer is very similar to the previous Prusa bed slinger style printers like the Mark IVs. So you have your Z-axis screws here. There's 3 now, which is interesting. This axis, I think it's the X-axis. Yeah. My brain always screws this shit up. It's a linear rail now instead of 2 rods. I don't know why they've made this change, but that's what it is now. And then there is 2 sets of steppers for the Y-axis now instead of just 1. Lighthouse Benchy. 17 hours? That might be a little too much sauce. Fast forward some amount of time, the printer is actually out now, so we've got public access to the profiles, and we can go through this like you would at home if you were to buy one of these. So I've got PrusaSlicer downloaded on this lovely MacBook here, which is not mine. Thank you, Jake Bell, for letting me borrow it. Now, it's worth noting you don't have to log in to use this printer at all. You can use this printer with any slicer that's compatible with it. You can use it without having to log in, without having to connect to the internet. You just take the USB stick out, plug it into your laptop, which I guess we're not doing because it's a MacBook and it only has Type-C. Plug it back in and print. But I'm gonna use the account anyways because I think that this is how most people will do it, and it does allow us to show off some of the cool online features that it does have. There's lots of places you can find stuff to print, Thingiverse, Printables, Maker World. I usually like to use Printables, which is Prusa's own service because it's just got nice interface, good quality models. There's lots of fun stuff on the main page, which honestly is probably the main thing for me. Speaking of cool models on the front page, I scrolled past this M1 Pro car kit card that looks pretty sick, and I think it's complicated enough with some overhangs and stuff that this would be actually a good way to test this printer. So we're gonna do this. Now, what color? Was there ever an orange Pro car? Oh yeah, okay. I like red. Red's a good color. They made an M1 in red, did they not? Yeah, they did. Hell yeah. Actually, there was even a Pro car that was red. Perfect. See you later, orange. Lipstick red PLA. You know, if you've ever done 3D printing or looked into 3D printing, you've probably heard of PLA. PLA is great because it's really easy to print with. It doesn't like to stick to the nozzle and gum it up. It doesn't clog. It doesn't really wear out the nozzles. It's dimensionally pretty stable. The only thing it isn't is good at high temperatures. So if you're printing something for inside your car, not gonna work unless you live somewhere where it's literally cold all year round. I was designing like a little phone mount for my car and printed like a test version just to check the dimensions and stuff. I printed it in PLA, and like a day of it sitting out in like not that hot Vancouver weather, it was like drooped way down. It didn't even have a phone on it. We're gonna pick Prusament PLA. I'm gonna change the infill. The default grid is like fine when you're just printing something that you just for looks or whatever, but I pretty much always use adaptive cubic, which is pretty much the same speed as the grid pattern, but it's 3-dimensional. So whatever you print is not exactly, but more equally strong in all dimensions than the grid pattern, which is like across. So vertically might not be as strong. And the cool thing about the adaptive one is if there's big voids in your print, like in the middle, you see it, like it just leaves empty space there and puts the more structural stuff in the parts that actually matter. It's very cool. Okay, I played around with it a little bit more. We're gonna do 20% infill, so a little bit less, a 0.2 layer height by default, and then I have adaptive layer height enabled, and I just left it at the default, told it adaptive and sliced it, and it says 6 hours and 20 minutes. So that should give us a pretty good balance of, you know, the tops of the model being pretty smooth, but it printing relatively quickly. So Prusa Connect is their online cloud platform, I guess. This allows you to be like in a different place than your printer, and as long as it's connected to the internet and ready to go, you can queue up prints from anywhere. So you can see the file transfer to Prusa Connect is already done, and then it needs to download to the printer, which you can see, hey, downloading. Now this is one of my pain points with this thing. This is a 12 megabyte G-code, which is on the larger side. G-code being like the file that tells the printer what to print. But as you can see, the remaining time on this file transfer says almost 10 minutes. Now, I don't know if it's actually going to take that long. And we're talking 12 megabytes. I'm not 12 gigabytes, 12 megabytes. The reason that this is so slow is because they're using this like really crappy Wi-Fi module that it's pretty cheap. And it actually does the file transfer over serial, which is a bit of a limitation. Now, I complained about this to them because my home printer, I have the same problem where the file transfers are just excruciatingly slow. And apparently it has set a bit of a fire off at Prusa, so maybe by the time you're watching this video, they'll have released a new version, I don't know. However, if you use Prusa Connect, they have this cool streaming feature where the G-code streams from Prusa Connect to the printer so it can actually start before it's even done the transfer, which is very cool. Kind of resolves some of the concerns I just brought up. But if you have an unreliable Wi-Fi connection and it cuts out partway, I could definitely see how it would cause some problems for you. On a printer of this echelon, I want 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. You're paying a lot of money, it should be a little better than this. Since we're printing PLA, we've got to open the little top vents as per the instructions. That allows cool air to come in. 25 out of 20. So its target is 20 degrees, which means the fans at the back are gonna be running constantly, and I feel them, to try to keep the chamber cooler. Oh, I didn't realize there's like LEDs here. But what I do know is there's LEDs behind here. That's just to make it a little easier to see your print. Oh, you know what it's also for? To make it easier to see with the camera. Right, I forgot about that. Hey, you see, look at that, there's a camera. It doesn't have like a time-lapse mode or anything like that, as far as I'm aware, which I feel like it probably should. And the fact that it's a separate product in general is kind of weird at this price point. $1,200 US should come with better Wi-Fi and a camera by default. It's not an expensive camera. Like, how much does this thing cost, Prusa? Okay, so the camera is $40. It does feel like it should just be included. Now, to be fair, I almost never use the camera on my Mark IV's Prusa because it is so reliable. I actually don't know if I've ever had a print failure on it. It's pretty high resolution. It's like nice and sharp, so that's good, at least. I guess at this point, let's just let this print and we'll come back and see the results. And let's take a look at our prints. So I ended up printing a couple more things and a couple different materials to try things out. But this is the first print with our variable layer height in PLA. It's not the cleanest thing ever. I don't know if the variable print height is the best thing ever, and I think there's just some wonkiness in this model in the back. You can kind of see there's some voids there on the overhangs, but I mean, it did warn us about those, to be honest. The overhangs on the wheel arches are not perfect, but they're pretty damn impressive for the amount of just like free hanging plastic that's there and how thin that is and how aggressive of an angle it is. It looks pretty good, but you can see, hey, the variable layer height sometimes is obvious on the side. You can see the spots right there. This is with the speed profile and definitely not like tuned for maximum quality or anything like that. And to be fair, I didn't dry the filament at all ahead of time. If you're new to 3D printing, buy a filament dryer, dry all your filament. It will make things so much easier. Because that one wasn't perfect, I decided to print it again in a different filament without variable layer height, aside from just on the top to smooth that out a little bit, and with a 0.15 height elsewhere. and also with no supports. And like overall, in terms of like print quality, it seems to be exactly as I would expect. It's basically like a Mark IVS. And I guess I can assemble a car. Hey, look at that. You can see our first attempt at the wheels, not bad. Second attempt looks a little bit cleaner. I did have a chance to dry this marble filament before we used it, so I think that that's definitely part of it. And then it would be weird if we had red tires. So we also printed tires, but these are out of a soft filament. You can see it's got some squish. I used Duramic's TPU. I mean, TPU, assuming that it's dry, is fairly easy to print with because it's so sticky. It's not like it's gonna peel off of the build plate. I didn't test the tolerances on using different materials because some of them shrink a little differently than others. Stick it on there anyways. Nothing a little glue couldn't fix. I mean, it rolls, but like, you might lose a tire. Now, let's talk tricky filaments, because let's be honest, the big draw of having an enclosure is being able to print filaments that require like a heated environment, because they're so high temp that if you don't have it, they will warp. And warp they did. This is with Prusament PC Blend, which is designed to be like an easier to print polycarbonate. This is a material that prints at a very high temperature, is traditionally quite difficult to print with. I left the filament in a heated dry box in between these two prints for several hours, and you can see on the left, the results are quite a bit better the second go around. This is with the satin build plate, and it looked like it adhered pretty well at the start, but this is like a 5-6 hour long print, and eventually it did start to warp. I tried to print them all in one go, and these are very tall, and spaghetti happened. Now, so while having an enclosure is definitely nice for printing more complicated, advanced filaments like this, it's not a magic or silver bullet. But it does offer some other nice things. I definitely noticed that this printer is way quieter than the Mark IVS. I'm not sure how much of that is because it's a Core XY design and it's not like moving this giant bed back and forth versus how much is from the fact that it's in an enclosure. I imagine the enclosure is a big part of it. Because I was having problems with the other model, I tried a different little like clampy guy. It's a little bit smaller. And this one printed pretty much perfectly. I tried the textured build plate, and if you look at it, it doesn't look like it warped much at all. Maybe a tiny, tiny little bit. On the first print, I had everything on there, and the screw, you can see there's a giant glob on there. If you're doing advanced filaments like this, highly recommend trying the hardened obsidian nozzles that they sell. You can also get like fancier nozzles from other vendors that work with these printers, because the stock brass nozzles that come on here are very sticky for certain plastics, especially polycarbonate. And as it builds up, you're just gonna have situations like this. Overall thoughts then. If you're willing to get DIY, and I don't know the exact amount of time it will take to build a machine like this, because the DIY kits aren't out yet, but when they are, it's about $250 less. So you're looking at 950 USD to buy the DIY kit. And if you want to compare it to the Mark IVS, it's about $200 less, regardless of if you're doing DIY or buying pre-assembled. You're getting bigger build volume, which is always nice. You can print bigger stuff. You're getting a quieter printer, one that takes up less space, assuming you were gonna buy a Mark IVS with an enclosure. It's better than the Mark IVS in a lot of ways. It still has some of the same issues, like the Wi-Fi is not great. It's not the most beginner friendly. Like, don't get me wrong, I can understand why people buy printers from like Bamboo Labs, for instance. They are very newbie friendly. You also have to consider the rest of the market. Price comparison wise, your other options, X1C from Bamboo Labs, the new Creality, is it K2 Pro, I think is what it's called. They're all kind of in the same price bracket. So if you were to go with the Bamboo, you have their AMS system if you are looking for a multi-material setup, which, to be honest, the Prusas, they have their MMU3, which is a multi-material setup. It can only do 5 materials and is a lot more bulky than the Bamboo equivalent. And Creality has a similar setup, but with way bigger build volume on the printer that's in the similar price class as this. So there's a lot of competition. But if you go with a Prusa, you're getting something that is repairable, with parts that you can 3D print yourself to replace if you need, with a big community behind them and a lot of modding support. Even though this printer like came out a couple days ago, there's already accessories that they made first party. Like I saw this cool door you can put on to make a dry box inside of here. Definitely recommend that. and who knows what the community will develop. I think it's pretty sick. If you're gonna buy a Mark IVs, you should probably just buy this one instead. If you care about spending your money on something you can actually fix and upgrade, I didn't even mention that. They're actually gonna offer this as an upgrade kit for the Mark IV-S for like 400 or 500 bucks US. We'll put it on screen, however much it is. It's not out yet, but that's a pretty compelling upgrade if you want an enclosure. I'm very, very tempted, personally. Prusa, you still got some work to do, but I like this thing. And I like you. So get subscribed, hit the like button, and let me know what you think about this Prusa Core 1.